Okay, here is our review for chapter 6. So first thing we're going to do is graph a radical equation. So remember, radical just means anything with a root. So to graph this square root equation, I'm going to go to the y equals button on my calculator and type in -3 and then square root of x minus 2 minus 1. So just a reminder that we need to make sure this minus 1 is not under the parentheses. Under the square root. So on the calculator, make sure after you type the 2, you go over to get out of the square root before you type that -1. So then once you've got that, you can look at the graph. You should be able to see it just in the regular window. And then look at the table and start to get some points. So when we have a square root function, we want to look where it starts. So we want to find that first point where we have an actual number where we don't have just an error. So on this graph, that's at 2. So at 2, -1 is our first point. And then from there, you can either just count by ones and you will have some decimals, or you can kind of jump around and do the whole numbers. I'm just going to do going up by 1 because we will get enough whole numbers that our graph won't be too hard. 4, 5, 6, 7. So 2, -1, 3, -4, 4, -5.2, 5, -6.2, 6, -7, and 7, -7.7. So I'm going to take these over to the graph. Some of these will have to be estimates, that's okay. So 3, -4, 4, -5, and a little bit more, 5, -6, and a little bit more, 6, -7, and 7, -7.7. So then connect these and have it kind of flatten out, arrow on one end. So just a reminder, do not put an arrow at this end because it does not continue that way. That's where we had error on our table. And so that is where the graph starts. It does not continue both directions. Solve the equation of the same function we just graphed. -3 square root x minus 2 minus 1 equals -10. So we are just going to solve for x. So we can add 1 to both sides. -3 square root, and then now we've got -9. Divide out that -3, and square root of x minus 2 equals positive 3, because a negative divided by negative becomes a positive. Square both sides. X minus 2 equals 9, and then we get x equals 11, because we add that 2 over. Alright. Another way you could do this is to look on the table look for when y equals -10. And when you find that y equals negative 10, then look for what x equals. So if you go to the table and keep scrolling down until you find where y is negative 10, x is 11. This could also possibly show up on our graph, but our graph, so I can tell our graph's a little bit off. We would have had this point here if I hadn't estimated. So I guess I'd be careful going off the graph unless you know for sure, but the table is definitely a great choice, or just solving it, because we have done plenty of solving problems like this. All right, explain why why negative 3 square root x minus 3 equals 9 has no solution. So if I start to solve this, if I divide both sides by negative 3, I get the square root of x minus 3 equals negative 3, because positive 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3. So right now I have the square root equals a negative number. A square root cannot equal a negative number. A negative number. So just a sentence about something like that is what you'll need for the test. Just somehow explain, why is this an issue? Why don't we want x to, or the square root to equal a negative? And actually, I'm going to try, yeah, that's not much better. All right. Another solving one here. So we want to get rid of that fraction exponent. So to get rid of fraction exponents, we do the opposite fraction. So right now I have 2/3, so we're going to flip that around and get 3/2. So 3 divided by 2. So these cancel. I'm left with x minus 5, and then 25 raised to the 3/2. So you'll need to type that in your calculator, 25, then you'll do the little raised button. And if you have an older calculator or a smaller calculator, you are going to have to make sure and use parentheses. Everyone using one of the black graphing calculators should be okay without the parentheses, but you can do better safe than sorry. It won't be wrong if you include them. But either way, we're going to get 125. Add that 5. X equals 130. All right, that is the first half of the review. The second part are word problems. The velocity of a free falling object on Earth is given by this equation, where g is 9.81 and h is the distance or height that the object has fallen. If an object hits the surface of the Earth with a velocity of 20 meters per second, from what height was it dropped? So they're giving us the velocity. They're giving us v. We need to solve for h. We don't know h. So v is 20. Square root 2 times g is 9.81 times h. We don't know. So we need to get everything over to the other side so that we are just left with h on one side. So before I even get rid of that square root, I'm going to multiply these two together. So 2 times 9.81 is 19.62 h. So now I'm going to get rid of the square root. I'm going to square both sides. 20 squared is 400 equals 19.62h, because the square root is gone now. Divide out the number. 6,400 divided by 19.62 is 20.4. And I'm going to say meters, that equals our height. Next one. The lateral surface area, called S, of a regular square pyramid is given by this equation. P is the perimeter, S is the base length, or the side, and H is the height. I'm going to zoom in so I can write side here. So base length and side are kind of the same thing. The area of the base, B, of the square pyramid is given by this equation, where S is the side length of the square. The total surface area of the square pyramid with a base length of 80 yards is 14,400 yards square. So I'm just going to underline B is the area of the base. What is the height of the square pyramid? All right, so the important thing to kind of think about or remember here is that there's two things going on. There's the lateral surface area and there's the area of the base. So if we think of a pyramid, it has one base and this one has 4 triangles. So the 4 triangles, that is our lateral surface area. So it's all the sides. The base is the bottom. So the base is a square. So they give us the total surface area. So if we do S, the S formula, plus the base formula, we're going to get the total. So we kind of need to put those formulas together to equal the total to then work backwards to figure out the height. So the base one is kind of easy. So base is just the side squared, 80 squared. So 80 squared should be 6,400, but let me check. Yes. And so even the S, we can plug in what we know so far. So we've got 1/2. The perimeter is just when you add up the 4 sides. Perimeter is 80 times 4. So that's 320. And then we've got this big square root. 1/2 of the side is 40 plus h squared. So h is what we don't know. H is what we're trying to find. So let's clean this up a little bit. So 1/2 of 320 is 160. And then in here, 40 squared is 1,600 plus h squared. So this formula is S. This is B. So we add those together for the total. So we've got 160 square root 1,600 plus h squared plus 6,400 equals 14,400. Oh, one too many zeros. So first thing I'm going to do is subtract this off. So then we've got our 160 and the square root. So 14,400 minus 6,400. We've got 8,000. Divide out the 160. We get 50. I'm going to have to move over here. Oh. So this side we still have the square root. This side is now 50. Square both sides. Equals 50 squared, 2,500. Subtract the 16. H squared equals 900. Square root both sides. H equals 30. And I'm just going to double check my math here. Yep. So this is supposed to be an H. All right. So that problem, while a little bit longer, everything you need is there. So just kind of remembering they're giving you the formula in two parts, and then you have to put it together for this total here. But once we kind of put all the pieces together, solve it all the way down and get h by itself, we get the height equals 30. All right, let me know if you have any questions.